The inhaler was empty, and nobody in that gymnasium knew it yet. 12-year-old Sophia Reyes had brought it to the field trip herself, tucked in the side pocket of her backpack the way she'd been taught since she was 6. What she hadn't known, what none of the adults chaperoning 40 middle schoolers through a science museum's traveling exhibit had thought to check, was that the inhaler had been empty for 3 weeks, forgotten and unrefilled during a chaotic end of summer. By the time anyone noticed Sophia was in trouble, she was on the museum's gymnasium floor, lips tinged faintly blue, and the only adult moving toward her with any certainty at all was a substitute teacher nobody on staff had bothered to learn the name of. Her name was Renata Castillo. She was 53 years old, and for the past 4 years, the district had known her only as the quiet one, the substitute who showed up early, left without small talk, and filled in for sick teachers with a competence that somehow never earned her a compliment. Only a shrug. What happened in the next 6 minutes would end permanently. The quiet apology Renata had been making to herself every day since she left medicine. Renata had not always been invisible. For 19 years, she had been the head nurse of a Level 1 trauma ICU at St. Basil's Regional. The kind of nurse residents were assigned to shadow because her instincts outran the monitors by a full 30 seconds, every time. She had run codes with a calm that made panicking doctors half her age steady their own hands just by standing near her. She had a wall of thank you cards in a box she never unpacked after she left, because unpacking it would have meant admitting she still needed to look at them. The end came on a Tuesday in October, 4 years ago. A 19-year-old named Marcus had come in after a car accident, stable, improving, everyone's guard easing exactly the way protocol warned it shouldn't. Renata had been off shift 11 minutes. In the parking garage, when Marcus's oxygen dropped in a way that should have triggered an alarm and, due to a maintenance error, no one caught until the review did not. By the time the night nurse found him, it was too late. The hospital's internal review cleared Renata of any fault. It hadn't mattered. She had spent 19 years believing that if she was simply good enough, fast enough, present enough, nothing would ever slip past her. Marcus slipped past her while she was in a parking garage checking her phone. She turned in her resignation 11 days later and never worked in a hospital again. She became a substitute teacher because it required a background check and a pulse, and because standing in front of a classroom, she reasoned, no one's life would ever depend on her hands. She had been wrong about that for 4 years without knowing it. The school board had approved the museum trip against the objections of a parent volunteer named Donna Whitfield, a board member and hospital foundation donor who had loudly questioned in a meeting 2 weeks earlier whether a revolving door of substitutes should be trusted to supervise students on off-campus excursions at all. Renata had been standing in the hallway outside that meeting, unseen, when she heard herself described that way. On the morning of the trip, Dana arrived as a chaperone specifically, she told another parent, to keep an eye on things. She spent the first hour of the exhibit visibly unimpressed with Renata's quiet, unremarkable presence. A woman who counted heads at every doorway, who noticed which kids lagged behind, who said little and managed everything. All of which Dana mistook for a lack of authority rather than the opposite. Sophia went down near the gravity exhibit 40 minutes in. She had been struggling to breathe for several minutes before that, quietly, the way children do when they don't want to make a scene, until her body made the decision for her and she sat down hard on the gymnasium floor. Gasping, Dana reached her first and did the only thing her instincts offered, which was to shout for help in a voice that made everything worse. 2 other chaperones froze. A museum employee ran for a first aid kit that would do nothing for what was actually happening. Renata was already moving. She crossed the gymnasium floor at a pace that made Dana step back on instinct, some part of her recognizing authority even before her mind caught up to why. "I need you to stop shouting," Renata said, dropping to her knees beside Sophia, her voice pitched low and level, the exact register she had once used on families in the worst moment of their lives. "Sophia, look at me. You're safe. I need her inhaler now. Someone produced it. Renata checked it in under 2 seconds, a motion so practiced it looked almost careless, and understood immediately it was empty, the canister light and hollow in her palm. She discarded it without a flicker of panic reaching her face. She needs epinephrine or a hospital, and she needs it fast, Renata said. Someone call 911. Tell them severe asthmatic distress, possible early respiratory failure. Patient is 12. The clinical precision of the words landed strangely in a gymnasium full of parents who had never heard a substitute teacher speak that way about anything. You're not qualified to... Dana started. I have 19 years in a trauma ICU. Renata said without looking up, positioning Sophia upright and leaning her forward, opening her airway with hands that had done this exact motion hundreds of times in circumstances far worse than a gymnasium floor. I am the most qualified person in this building. Call now. Before we continue, if you believe that quiet competence deserves to be seen and second chances deserve to be earned, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. Sophia's breathing was deteriorating, each inhale shorter and more desperate than the last. Her fingernails beginning to take on the same pale blue tinge as her lips. Renata kept talking to her in a voice that never wavered, counting her breaths aloud, adjusting her position by degrees. Buying time the only way available without equipment, through positioning, through calm, through the particular authority of someone who had spent 19 years believing calm itself could be a form of treatment. A museum staff member arrived with an AED and a basic first aid kit, useless for anaphylaxis, but Renata used what was there, checking Sophia's pulse against her wrist with 2 fingers while continuing to narrate reassurance the girl could barely process through her panic. 90 seconds passed, then 2 minutes. Sophia's breathing began, almost imperceptibly to steady, not resolved, but no longer in free fall, her body responding to positioning and to a voice that refused to let fear enter the room. Paramedics arrived at the 6-minute mark to find a stabilizing patient, and a set of vitals called out to them in exact clinical language before they'd finished crossing the gymnasium floor. The lead paramedic, kneeling to take over, glanced up at Renata mid-handoff and said only, "Good work." "ICU? 19 years, Renata said. "St. Basil's." The paramedic's eyebrows lifted. "I trained under someone from St. Basil's. Castillo, maybe." "Everyone still talks about her." Renata said nothing. She stood, stepped back to let the professionals work, and for the first time in 4 years let herself feel, without immediately suppressing it, that the wall of unopened thank-you cards in her closet might have meant something after all. Dana Whitfield found her in the museum hallway 20 minutes later. Sophia stable, and en route to the hospital with her mother, color returned to her small face. Dana's expression had none of its earlier certainty left in it. "I said you weren't qualified," Dana said. "In front of everyone." "You did," Renata said. There was no anger in it. "Just fact. Why didn't you correct me?" "At the board meeting. You were standing right there." "I saw you afterward." Renata considered the question longer than it seemed to need. "Because I left medicine believing I wasn't good enough to be trusted with anyone's life again. It was easier to let you be wrong about me than to find out I might still be wrong about myself." Dana didn't have a response for that. What she did instead, over the following weeks, mattered more than an apology delivered in a hallway. She brought Renata's actual credentials, the one sitting unused in a drawer for 4 years, to the district superintendent, along with a formal recommendation that the schools maintain an emergency response-trained staff member on every off-campus trip, a policy the board adopted within the month and named, without asking Renata's permission. After St. Basil's, Renata Castillo still substitutes. She hasn't gone back to nursing full-time, not yet, though she unpacked the box of thank-you cards 2 weeks after the museum trip and read every one. What changed is smaller than a career reversal and larger than it sounds. The students in her classrooms now know her name, and so finally does she. Sophia's mother sent one more card that fall, the first Renata had received in 4 years, that she read the same day it arrived. It said simply that her daughter was alive, because a woman everyone had underestimated refused to stop believing her own hands still knew what to do. If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, has a quiet, overlooked person in your life ever turned out to be exactly who you needed?